Hello, hello. Yanely, thank you so much for hanging out.
Girl, I'm so excited to join you. I feel like we met a while back and we're like, we gotta reconnect and
I
recollab, like do all these things.
know.
Finally, it's happening.
I am so excited. So, first of all, congratulations on your book, Mind Your
Thank you.
Money. This
Thank you
is
so much.
huge. So, tell us a little bit about why you decided to write this book right now, I should say.
Yeah, so I have read so many books, about personal finance, about money management and like personal development. And I felt like some part of me was kind of hesitant to write a book about money because I was like, another book about like there's so many books about personal finance. But I really did feel like I could do something that had not been done before, which was to write a book that was a combination of personal finance and personal stories.
Mhm.
Because I think that the personal stories element sometimes is like completely left out, and there's so much nuance when it comes to money that if you ignore the personal stories and the background, the culture, the religion, the social
Mhm.
aspects, you sort of you're left with like the tips and tricks and the pay yourself first and the invest 10%, and that it just it's missing so much of like the the stuff that actually makes it real for people to actually apply. So I
Mhm.
wanted to do something a little different, and my book is a little bit of stories plus strategies combined for people to actually apply when, especially when they're the first in their family.
Which I think is ironically where people learn the best. It's when you can have a story. Most people just remember that story versus like pay yourself first. Like, okay, cool. What, like, who gives a crap about that? But if they hear the
Right.
story behind it, then it
Yeah.
hits home. So I really admire that you did that.
Thank you. I do think it's important because storytelling is it's something that we have in our DNA. Like humans we're wired for stories. We're wired to hear stories, to tell stories. And a funny story, when I was a little girl, I actually was the national storytelling champion for a few years.
What?
Like in elementary school, I went to the state level, I went to Albany in upstate New York and competed against all the best storytellers in the state. And you'd have to like memorize a book word for word, and there'd be a
What?
panel of judges in front of you on the table, and they would have a copy of the book before them, and they would be reading the book word for word as you were reciting it and performing it. And so I've always been a natural storyteller, not always a natural writer, but I knew that I had stories in me that I wanted to tell. And so, I kind of mustered up the courage to finally put the book together.
I love that. How long did it take for you to start to formulate all of like the outline and then write it? Like, what was your timeline?
So I would say dedicated 18 months. I decided to write it in at the end of 2019 and like made the commitment. But then of course we all know what happened in 2020, and I kind of paused because I didn't really know what the tone of the book would be. It's hard to talk to people about money during such an uncertain time where nobody really knew what was going to happen. So then I kind of picked it back up again at the end of 2021 and finished it at the end of 22.
So when you mentioned like storytelling kind of comes naturally to you. When you were starting to put this stuff on paper, was that a difficult process for you? Did you have to like kind of rethink things? Did you have to like talk to communicate to get all the writing? Like what was your strategy there?
Yeah, so I worked with Scribe Media, which is going through some transitioning right now. But the way that they pitch their services is actually a lot of people have a book in them, but don't necessarily sit to write it, and that's
Yep.
okay. You don't have to be a natural writer in order to get your book written. So what they did is conducted a series of interviews. It was like over 20 hours of interviews, and then they take your interviews and they transcribe all of the words that you share, the answers to your outline and questions in your draft into a draft manuscript. Now, the funny thing is, I thought, oh, this is going to be amazing. They're going to send me a draft manuscript and it's going to be my book. It's going to be done.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. As much as it made it easier for me to not have to start from scratch with a white blank page, it still was not my book, like nowhere near what the
Yeah.
book looks like now. I had to do so much work editing and revising and rewriting and cutting out parts because obviously when you're talking naturally, it's different from the written word, right? So
It's true.
I would recommend this to people that if you feel writer's block, or if you're not naturally like the type of person to sit and write on a blank page without getting anxiety,
Mhm.
to record what you want to say and transcribe it, because that definitely helped me get over the hump of staring at a blank page.
Yeah, that would help me too. I feel like that blank page cursor is just the worst thing. It's always like so tricky to like get past
Yeah.
that block.
Yeah.
I'm always curious. So after you write a book, and I've never written one, so this process is so fascinating to me. After you write that and you're putting it out into the world, you're talking to people about it. Do you
Yeah.
ever go back? Is there something where you're like, oh, I wish I would have included that. Like this would have been so great. Was there
Yeah.
anything that you wish you would have included that wasn't in the book?
Oh my gosh, yes. There's so many things. Like there's always like a little nuance or something. Like for
Yeah.
example, my sister, she's one of the first people to read the book. And I mention her a lot in my book because we grew up, like very similar. We're about a year and a half apart.
Oh
And
yeah.
everybody like treated us like twins. So, we're kind of attached at the hip as little girls. And so there were a lot of memories and things that I remember early on experiencing with her, or like jealousy around her having a job before I did and having
Right.
money before I did, buying Jordans before I did, all that kind of
Totally.
stuff. So I put that in my book. And it's funny because when she read it, she was like, fact check, like that's not what I she called
Sisters
me out.
are the worst.
She called me out. She was like, girl, you said I got my first paycheck and went and bought Jordans, but that's not true. I used my second paycheck to buy Jordans, and my first paycheck I used to add minutes to my prepaid cell phone.
That is so funny. You're like, well, my bad.
Oops, oops.
That's
But
like so
yeah.
something my sister would do too.
Oh my gosh. She was like calling me out for all these little things. I was like, girl, stop nitpicking. Did you like the book overall? But
Yeah, you're like, we don't need the details right now. Come on.
exactly. And it's funny because like and all those tiny elements don't really change, the gist of
Yeah,
the book. But
no.
it's funny because from her perspective, she sees it her way. But it's funny, there's a lot of things like that where I'm like, oh, I wish I could, add a specific type of nuance
Yeah,
that would really enhance the story or like clarify, really what I meant a little better. I think
sure.
with writing, the most important thing about writing is clarity. When you're reading
Yeah.
something and you're not really sure, you're like, this isn't really clear. It's the worst feeling for a reader to be confused. So I tried very hard to go through with like a fine-tooth comb and make sure that everything that I wrote was like, it was clear. My intention for what I wanted the reader to get from my stories and from the strategies were really clear. So I think I did that well, but there's always something that you come back and go like, oh, I want to change that. I want to make that better.
Version 2, you never know, right?
That's right. Second
There's always
edition.
additives. Exactly. So
Yes.
let's go back a little way. So you are very open in your book about all of your childhood, your personal experiences, everything you've gone through. So for somebody who hasn't read your book yet, give us a
Mhm.
little context. Like, how was money talked about when you were a kid?
Yeah, well, it wasn't. I grew up in a low income household, so my parents both immigrated from Dominican Republic,
Mhm.
first gen on both sides. So neither one of them, were born and raised here. Neither one of them went beyond elementary school. They never went to middle school,
Mhm.
high school, or college. And when they got here, they didn't know anybody. They didn't have any money, no education. So it was an extremely limited experience in terms of what they were trying to figure out as they navigated, especially money when they got here. So neither one of them had bank accounts. I never saw them write a check. I never saw them have debit cards, definitely not credit cards. And so they were cash only, but a lot of those decisions were happening kind of behind closed doors in their room. They would talk about money and we weren't really involved. Like they have
Mm.
9 kids. So I'm one of 9 siblings. That
Whoa,
right
I
there,
missed that.
but that right there kind of sets the scene for like the chaos in the household, right? Like 9
Yes.
kids and growing up in a household with not a lot of money, it's a lot. So I
It's a
think
lot.
for my parents, they kind of felt like they're trying to do the best they can with what they do have and what they do know, and they didn't want us to stress about how they don't have resources for certain things. But they were very honest when they didn't have it, and honestly, most of the time it was, no, we don't have money for that. No, you can't go on that class trip. No, that's too expensive. And my older siblings, who were like, my oldest sibling is in her 40s. I'm in my early 30s, so she was definitely like in college and high school when I was, still in middle school. And she
Mhm.
helped pay for a lot of the things that my parents said I couldn't do. So like my teenage siblings kind of stepped up to the plate and worked and helped out with the finances in the household because my
Mhm.
parents just couldn't do it alone. But a lot of that we just never discussed. So it's one of those things where you kind of observe, and it's like silent agreement that, when people are in a bad mood, it's because money's tight and don't ask for money. And
Yep.
when dad's in a good mood, oh, okay, maybe he's got a little wiggle room in the budget this month. And so you might want to ask for $5 now while he's in a good mood.
Yep, yep. This is exactly how my childhood was too, where it was 6 in my family. So very, very
Wow.
similar.
So
What I get that. I totally get that. But I think that theme is so prevalent where people just don't talk about money. And when they
Right.
do, it's usually in a negative way.
Definitely.
For you, when did you start to observe that maybe there was a different way of handling money and there was like a totally different
Mhm.
side? Like it wasn't always just pinching pennies and saying no.
Yeah.
Like when did you start to notice like there could be something different?
I mean, I think I recognize that it could be different, but it wasn't in a positive way. It was a slightly negative thing because it was like a lot of peer pressure from my friends in
Oh.
college,
Mhm.
especially, where I was like, "Oh, mom would tell me no, I can't buy this, but like I have a credit card now, so I could buy it
Sure.
and I could just pay it little by little later on." So I started telling myself yes, more, and feeling like I had things under control, but really I was just accumulating a lot of credit card debt. And
Right.
especially because I was trying to fit in with, all these wealthy peers that were at school with me, that I was not in the same lane as them. But I was comparing myself to them constantly and feeling like, oh, but we're in the same class, so we're the same.
Yeah.
And, I really needed somebody to guide me, and I needed kind of like a money mentor to talk to me about why you might feel that you're the same, but really you're not coming from the same place, and you have to kind of address that. And but I think when it flipped to a positive realization around like money and what it can do for me and how I should use my money was in my mid 20s, when I read Susie Orman's Women and Money. It was the
Yep.
first money book I picked up and read. And just from the perspective of a woman too, Susie Orman's
Yeah.
very much confident about her ability to do her own finances and not need to rely on anyone else, especially not a father, a husband, a man, anything like that.
Mhm.
So for me, that was like very eye-opening, being in a household where my dad was the person who did all the money, and my mom often had to run and ask him, hey, we need money for school supplies, do you have? And he would say, you have to wait till next week. And so she was always at his mercy when it came to needing
Mhm.
money. And so that book, it was like really eye-opening for me to think that it didn't have to look that way. It could look differently, and I could take control of my finances and not rely on anybody else.
Mhm.
So I think for me, that's when it kind of like, it flipped the switch for me in my mind, that I needed to do something differently so I could create that
Yeah.
future for myself, as a future of financial independence.
I love that book too. I think that that is a very eye-opening one, especially if you grew up in the traditional roles,
Yes.
breadwinner is your father, and like I totally understand that too. I'm curious, you
Yeah.
said you wish you would have had like a money mentor that was guiding you through this process. I often wonder, I think of like young me when I was in college. If somebody would have came to me and been like, yo, girl, don't take out that much in student loans, be smart about some of your decisions. I'm like, would I have listened? I don't know. So I'm curious for
Mm.
you. What do you think maybe would be helpful to like tell younger generations so that we're not just coming across as like, don't spend your money? Like it's so like that's nobody likes to hear that. But how do we approach that conversation in more of a delicate, approachable way?
I love this question. And I actually try to address that in my book a little bit. Chapter 4 is called From Struggle Bus to Syllabus. And the reason why I put that chapter in there is because I thrived academically. I was always that
Mhm.
type of kid that, I don't know, like school just felt like the perfect environment for me to escape, the poverty, the
Totally.
mindset and the struggles of being in the hood, like that experience was at home. But when I was at school, like we were reading about different cultures. I was learning
Right.
about, all these different things, like Native Americans that used to live here before us, and like all it was so cool. Like I just was so obsessed with learning, and I was so curious as a kid that reading and writing and like math, like the subjects I was learning in school, it was very easy for me to dive into that and do really
Mhm.
well in school. But I never got a class about money. So for me, that's why I always think that if I could go back and talk to my younger self and be like, you see how you're getting this syllabus that tells you exactly what to do in your calculus class? You see how you have a syllabus that tells you exactly what to do to get an A in your AP classes? There's a syllabus to get an A plus in money. And especially when it comes to borrowing money and making sure you do it in a healthy way. So I kind of use that idea and that framework
Mhm.
to create like the credit syllabus, which is like, this percentage of your grade comes from you doing this. Just like a syllabus in school, 30% of your grade is attendance. Well, then you better show up to class to get the 30% towards your grade. And it's the same thing with your credit score. Like, I just wish someone had told me that 35% of my grade was making my payments on time every month. Now,
Right.
luckily for me, I was making all my payments on time every month, but I wasn't paying anything more than the minimum. So I was, my utilization was horrible. I wish someone had explained to me that the less I spend of my available credit, the more points I would get in that 30% category. So I think the certain way that you frame it in a
Mhm.
way that is digestible for a younger person, especially if they're a student, because for a student, you have a specific mindset where you're trying to successfully navigate your academics. If you could view this in that same way, I think more students would tackle finances in a much healthier way if they saw it broken down that way, or if it was explained to them in that way.
I totally agree with you too. And I think for a lot of younger people, especially like that high school, early college age group,
Yep.
a lot of the way that we talk to them about money is very much like, don't spend anything, like, never buy this, like,
Yeah.
and that's so like for somebody who's in college, that's your kind of goal at that time is to graduate, make money to buy nice things. And so it feels so counterintuitive. But I love that reframe for that like syllabus. I think that's a really good way to kind of view it, especially
Yeah.
for younger people too.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's just framing it positively and giving you a guidebook of like, here's what to do, not like what you don't do. When we frame things negatively, it's like, oh, great, I can never do anything fun. I can never enjoy the money that I,
For sure.
and that's definitely where your mind goes when you're 23, 22, and you're trying to, YOLO in your 20s. But at the end
Right.
of the day, that's not what this is about. It's about setting yourself up for success well beyond your 22, 23 years. So I think if you frame it that way, they'll get it, especially because like hashtag adulting is right around the corner when you're in your early 20s, and it's very real for you. It's visceral that after graduation, you got to figure it out.
It's
And
so
so,
true.
handing them this guidebook or the syllabus I think is like a really nice way to help them transition into that.
From your perspective, you've talked with a lot of educators, you've talked with younger people, you've talked with like grown ass adults that are trying to figure this stuff out still.
Yeah.
What do you think is like the biggest sticking point for people getting their stuff together with money?
I think it's getting the mind right. And that's actually
Yeah.
chapter 2 of my book is get your mind right. I, I think people, they're so scared of like the math part of
Yeah.
money, like,
True.
oh, but the percentage of my savings rate and how much am I supposed to have for retirement and what's my credit score? All of these numbers, they kind of scare people, right?
Mhm.
But that to me is actually the easy part of money. The math is the easy part because there's formulas, there's rules, right? You can just follow these things. You can, plug in the variables and figure the money out, the math and the numbers.
Right.
The psychological part, there ain't no formulas for that.
Yeah.
There ain't no tricks and tips for that. That's just work,
Yeah.
internal work, mental work, reflective work, therapeutic work. You got to forgive yourself for past mistakes. You got to be real with yourself about past money traumas. You got to go there to dark places. And a lot of times people are trying to not address those things or not bring up those memories because it's painful, because it's hard to acknowledge or to admit, and to revisit. So I feel like for me, I think when I meet people, they immediately jump to like, oh, how do I improve my credit score? I'm like, skirt, stop talking about your credit score. Let's talk about your money mindset and
Right.
how do you view credit, the role that it plays in your life? Why is it that you're so dependent on a credit score? Like, let's talk about these values that you have around all of these financial elements and how can we shift those to be healthier? And then we can get to the numbers.
Oh, so, so true. I do think we often do just go into tactics because you're right. It is easier. It's easy just to
Right.
say, hey, invest this much money if you want to retire by this age and you're good. But then it's
Yeah.
like, well, what about all the crap behind there that like I have to convince myself, I have to take those steps. I have to, monitor my actions and why I'm doing some of these emotional spend. Like it's so
Yeah.
true.
Yeah, especially because when it gets hard, and it's not if it's gonna get hard, it's when it gets hard because
Yeah.
it's gonna get hard. All of the stuff with money is tough. Then when it gets hard, you're so much more likely to give up because you haven't done that work, that mental work, and you don't really have that root, what I call the root why, like the real reason why you want to improve your finances has to be top of mind so that the moment you fail, you give up, you don't do the thing you're supposed to do, you're not gonna completely stop and go off path. Like you're going to say, okay, I already have a plan. I already know what I'm going to do. My root why is this. So it's going to remind me to, pick up where I left off. So I think the more you do that work, the more likely you are to just keep going in moments of failure and like the toughest moments of sticking to a financial plan.
It is really tricky too. So for you personally, like when you're a money expert, but I know money is still tough sometimes. Like it is for me too. Like that's very normal.
Yeah.
And so for you, how do you stay motivated when maybe you're going through like a really tough time financially? How do you start to like be okay with that? Or maybe you're not okay with that. I'm not sure, but how do you approach it?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it's what is, and I got this. I'm not going to take credit for this, but I did a teaching program called Teach for America right out of
Oh,
college,
sweet.
and I did like 6 weeks of intense summer training, where you're just thrown into a classroom and you're working with students almost immediately after graduating. So 23 years old. What do I know about managing a classroom? And here I am, like having to learn on the fly, learn by doing. But one of the things that they told us was you can only focus on what is in your locus of control.
Mm,
Anything that is outside of your locus of control is not worth the tiniest breath, not even the blink of an eye. It's not worth any energy at all because it is out of your locus of control. So it's useless to think about, to put energy towards,
yeah.
like it's just not worth it. And I really love that idea. And I think that concept applies to money as well. So every time I'm stressing out, like, recently I'll be real transparent. My parents, they have a house where I was raised, the same house where we kind of all grew up. It's our family home.
Mhm.
But before it was shared with an uncle of mine who had come to from the Dominican Republic around the
Oh,
same time as my dad. But recently, his family kind of decided that they want to not be owners of this home anymore. So we had to go through this whole process and figure out how we are going to deal with it. Do we want to sell our childhood home, which my family
That's
really didn't
hard.
want to do?
Right.
If not, then we're going to have to buy them out. And so
Right.
we had to navigate that. And it meant that I had to put up quite a bit of money. So,
Yeah.
and then after that, it was like, okay, now that we've bought them out, we now have to actually fix up the house so that we can rent where they used to live and actually have some cash flow for my parents. So
Yeah.
it's worked out beautifully, but to say it was not stressful and that it did not involve a lot of money from me, it would be a lie. So I had to come up with tens of thousands of dollars. Thank goodness I'm in a good financial position. And also that a lot of my siblings weren't able to do what I could. So, some of us put a little, some of us put a lot, some put more than others, but we all did what we could to come up with money for, the construction and for the buyout and all of the process with the house. That whole process was so stressful. And I just kept thinking to myself, what is in my locus of control, right?
Yeah.
Like there are so many things when it comes to a house, like and especially dealing with a lot of things that you can't control, right? And so for me, I was constantly revisiting that question: what can I do? What can I control? And whatever's outside of that, it is not even worth a thought, because I can't change it. I can't do anything to impact it. And that has really helped me just to stay focused, to stay positive, to continue to be action oriented instead of wasting hours worrying, complaining, feeling
What
anxiety.
ifs? Yep.
What ifs? And for what? Because it doesn't matter. You can't do anything about that right now. So just writing down on a piece of paper everything that is within your control and how you can immediately take action on these things for me, is an instant sigh of relief. Like I just feel immediately better.
So I love it's like self-coaching almost, like you're trying to get yourself out of
Yeah.
that funk. So when you're doing this, is it something you have to repeat? Because I think sometimes we hear this and we're like, oh, we hear it once and we're like, what can I control? Great, moving on. I feel like for me, I'm always like having to revisit it about 25,000 times.
Oh,
Is
yeah.
that true for you too?
Definitely. I mean, I catch myself worrying and thinking and thoughts of, anxious thoughts all the time. And what it is it's a practice. It's constantly telling yourself, oh, here I am doing that thing again. I'm
Yes.
worrying about what if property taxes go up on the house before the end
Right.
of the year, then the amount that we thought we were going to pay is going to go up. Can I control that? No. So why am I wasting my time here? What can I do right now? I can tell my siblings that we should add a little bit more each month to prepare for a potential increase. I could do certain things now, but sitting around worrying about what if this happens isn't one of the things that's going to help me make a change or do anything to, improve the situation. So I constantly catch myself having those thoughts and immediately just interrupt and say, okay, but can I control that? If
Hmm.
not, let me forget about that and let me think about what is in my direct
Hmm.
control.
I love that so much. I think that's a really good tip. It sounds like you've done a ton of work around mindset. And yes, you've
Yeah.
dedicated an entire chapter of your book to this concept too. Is there any other like mindset pieces that you think are really key for people to understand?
Yeah, my favorite one is the choosing chocolate. And that's just a little portion, a little excerpt from chapter 2 in the book, which is to get your mind right. I actually pull a bunch of behavioral scientists, behavioral economists, and folks that I call like my uncles and aunties in behavioral
Hmm.
economics, because they have really taught me. Like I wish I had like, money mentors, aunties, uncles, cousins, siblings that had like sat down and talked to me about money. And because
Hmm.
I didn't, I sort of see these people as my uncles and aunties in money, because I learned so much from their research, from their books, from the studies that they've conducted. And one of them is Shlomo Bernardsky, who has a TED Talk called Save for Tomorrow Tomorrow. And I highly recommend the TED Talk. It's probably like 20 minutes. It's
I
totally
don't think
worth
I've
the
seen this
watch.
one.
Oh my God, so good. So basically what he does is that he says, hey, let's say suppose we're at a TED Talk, kind of like this, like a conference,
Right.
and everybody comes up to the front and you look at the options for the next installment of the conference. So let's say like day 2 of the conference, in advance, you have to select what snacks you're going to have. And the two choices are going to be, you have a banana and you have a chocolate. So everybody says they're going to choose the banana on day 2, because of course we all want to make that healthy choice. We all want to, believe that we're going to pick the thing that we're supposed to pick, right?
Yep.
Then on day 2, all the people come back for the conference, the snacks are put out. The majority of people choose chocolate.
Huh.
Even though they said they were going to pick bananas, they didn't pick the bananas, they picked the chocolate. So the bias that they're exhibiting there is, future you is perfect. Future you is always going to do the right thing. But you right now, you give yourself a break right now. Present you, present me is just doing the best I can. It's fine. In the future me, she's going to get it right. She's going to start adding money to the 401k, because I can't do that right now. But when I get a raise, I'll do it. Oh, I can't do that. I can't, pay off my debt right now. I'm just going to keep the minimums. But when I get a bonus, then I'm going to do future me is going to pay off the debt. And so we keep delaying these things that we know we're supposed to be prioritizing right now. But because we put it off for the future version of us, who we view as being this perfect version of us, this perfect person who's going to do everything right and make the best choices, we feel like future us, they got us, they got our back. So I'm going to leave it to them. And then we never make the change. We never increase our contributions to the 403b, 401k. We never pay off the debt more than the minimum due each month. We never do it, because if you don't do it now, what magic is going to happen that's just going to make you do it tomorrow? If you didn't do it before, you're not going to do it. Future you is the same person that current you is. The only thing that changes is you're a little older, but it's the
It's
same
so
you.
freaking true. I'm dying right now because I actually legit went through it. This is not a money thing, but like I've noticed, this is like ADD. My cuticles, I've been picking and biting, and it drives me absolutely crazy. And so I'm under a little bit more stress today than I historically have been. So I was telling my partner Tony, I'm like, yo, dude, I am going to stop picking my cuticles when I get, for me, the flower pot built. And he's like, right, why don't you just do that today? I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm like, why call me out, man? What's going on? But it's true. It's the same
It's
exact
true.
concept. It's like, why would
Girl.
future me, who's probably also going to be stressed out, why would it magically change? You're spot on.
Exactly. Exactly. It's not, she's not
Huh.
going to do anything different. She's
No.
going to be doing the same thing that you're doing now.
Yes.
And so if there's something that you want to change about your finances, start now, even if it's a tiny
Yeah.
little step towards that progress that you take. It doesn't have to be this big gargantuan thing that you do. It doesn't have to
No.
be a massive step you take. It could be the tiniest thing, but just the fact that you took action now means that you're making that commitment, and future you is so much more likely to be on that path of continuing that, versus if you don't start now, you're not magically going to start tomorrow. So for
Yeah.
me, that was really powerful, because I kept telling myself, like, when I make more money, when my parents are retired, when I don't have to do this and that financially. And the reality is, no, the when is now. I have to start putting it into my budget now and getting serious about controlling it now.
Mhm.
Otherwise, nothing's going to change. 10 years are going to go by, and I'm going to be like, well, I still don't have a down payment for the house I wanted. I still didn't, pay off this debt. And because I didn't take action earlier, and, time went on. So that's, to me, is like a really great piece from that second chapter. And that whole section is called Choosing Chocolate, obviously, because if you don't make a change now, you're going to end up choosing chocolate.
Always.
And always. And really, the research around that is the bias that future you is perfect. So if anybody wants to look into that, I would recommend, looking at that bias, and also taking a look at that TED Talk called Saving for Tomorrow.
That is so good. I love that so much. I'm curious, when you're approaching changes in your life, or you have a friend that comes to you and they're like, Yanely, I'm trying to change this. I need some help. I want to just revamp everything. I'm just going to do all the things all at once. Is that a good strategy, or do you like recommend we like pare back a hair?
I think it depends on you, honestly, because most
True.
people would probably disagree and say, like, no, no, it's never a good idea to take on more more than you can handle. But going cold turkey sometimes is
It's true.
actually, it works for certain people, And I'll say, in my case, like, I was a spendaholic. I had like no consideration for why I was spending money the way I was, and what I was buying. It didn't matter. I would just buy stuff like Snickers bar, Snapple, lotion, a candle, just grab it all and just pay for it on the way out, just because, it was my advice. I had a really tough job. I would work from 6 a.m., sometimes to 6 p.m. all day with kids, after school, recess duty. I barely got a chance to go take a break and pee. I mean, teaching elementary school, and especially in a high intensity, like college prep type of environment, like in a charter school, it can be really tough. So for me, I would find myself shopping as a way to feel better, as like a vice. And
Mm,
so when I addressed that, right, the psychological piece of it, and I finally admitted that I had that problem, I knew that I couldn't trust myself, because I would just go to the store and buy again. So I went cold turkey, and I stopped bringing any money on me, on my person. So in my
smart.
book bag, in my purse, I had my laptop, I had my books, I had my lunch, an apple, a granola bar, bottle of water,
Mhm.
my keys, my wallet, with just my Metro card, my train pass. That's all that was in my wallet. I didn't have any cash, a debit card, a credit card, no money on me. And so if I needed to get to and from work, I had my Metro pass, I had my train pass. And to get in and out of my house, I had my keys. But I remember the first time I did it, I walked into the pharmacy with CVS. I would always go. And I picked up a bunch of crap. I was like, oh, my little trinkets that I usually get. Here's my lotion. Here's my little snack. And I went to the front to pay, and I felt completely stupid because I was like,
Yeah,
oh,
right.
wow, I don't even have money to pay this girl. Like, I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. I left my wallet in the car. I don't have a car. I don't have, I was like, just so embarrassed. And so I just ran out and I didn't come back. And that for me was like evidence that my problem was so bad. I had such a serious problem that I couldn't even control myself. It was so mindless that
Mhm.
going cold turkey was what I needed, and it worked for me. But
Yeah.
for a lot of other people, it might not work. Going that drastic might backfire. So I do think it sort of depends on, your personality, your character traits, what you respond well to. And for
Mhm.
some people, I think for a percentage of the population, going cold turkey is going to work. Going all out, doing the full big drastic thing is going to work for you. But for a lot of people, it might be too much, and they
Yeah.
might need to kind of break down like maybe a 4 or 5 step process and take it one step at a time.
That's so true. I'm cold turkey too. I have to. Like my
You do it.
brain just naturally is like, done, change, let's move on. Like I
That's
just
right.
I have to do it.
And you got to know that about yourself, which I think is part of half the battle is what am I going to respond well to? How do I know? Like,
Yeah.
figuring out, you got to know you better than anybody else knows you. And nowadays that's hard to do because nobody knows us better than Facebook, Google, these companies
It's
know
so
you.
true.
They see everything you
Uh-huh.
click, everything you buy, everything that you scan. If even if you just hover
Yep,
over it and choose not to buy it, they know.
they
And
do.
they're tracking all of that because knowing you and what you like and how you respond to things is so important for making money. So if we knew
Mhm.
ourselves just as well as these big corporations know us, we would be able to make our money. We would be able to make our money grow. They take our money from us because they know us better than we know ourselves. So we got
It's
to
so
kind of step in and
sad.
I know. It's the double-edged sword of technology, right?
It's true. It's like we love it and we hate it. Like there's so many pieces to, and it's so funny because it does. It's like it follows you every freaking where you go. You go on Amazon, look at a product, and pretty soon you're seeing it for the next 2 weeks. And I think
Seriously.
it's like 7 times is the average before somebody makes that purchasing decision. But
So
it's
annoying.
crazy.
So annoying. I remember when it first started happening.
Yeah,
And
same.
it's funny because I remember I think it was like on my Facebook page on the right side of my Facebook page. I was looking on Google. I searched up for like a pair of boots
Uh-huh.
and I didn't end up buying them. And then I went on Facebook and the boots were there and I was like, it's a sign. I'm supposed to have the boots. Look at this. The universe is
The
telling
universe
me
needs me to
the
have these.
boots. And I literally bought the boots thinking it was a sign.
Stop. That's so good.
Little did I know this is literally retargeting and like the algorithms at work.
So
So we now that we're more aware of it, I think it's more normalized, which is dangerous because
it's true.
now we're less, it's not as it doesn't affect us negatively as much. Now it's just normal. We just let it pass. But I think we need to
Mhm.
be just as appalled and disgusted and in fighting for like, privacy and all that because at the end of the day, this is ways that they get us to spend money on days when we had no intention of spending money that day.
Yeah. I mean, I fall victim to that often. Like I'll see something
Yeah.
and I'm like, "Oh, I do need these like cute light switches or whatever the crap it is." I'm like, "No, I do not. Like what is my deal?"
Yes.
But it's so
Yes.
convincing. And then you'll see it again and it's like 10% off and you're like, "Damn." Like
Now's my chance to save
I
that
just saved
money.
$2. Let's do it,
Exactly,
So
exactly.
funny. So okay, we focus so much on changing who we are, not even
Yeah.
changing, just acknowledging, becoming aware, like understanding our vices and doing all of that stuff.
Yep.
So, is that truly like the first step before you even dive into the tactics?
I think so. And honestly, I would say it's like the second half of the first step. So the first step is kind of two parts. One is assessing, just assess, like no judgment, no, like where are you realistically, like mentally, financially, like sit and just do an
Mm,
assessment. Just look, scan from head to toe and no judgment, right?
yeah.
And then you can kind of do the second part, which is to dive deep into your mind state and say, why is it that this assessment came up this way? What's the why for why I am doing this or doing that or having these problems? Like then you can kind of dive into the second half of that, which is now that you've assessed and you just have the data, now you need to look at the why behind it. Once you've done all that work, then you can actually do the math part. But the math part, honestly, is first of all, the easy part. To be real, there's so many calculators and budget spreadsheets and free things everywhere online that part is actually just a matter of sitting down and getting it done with, for some time. But the first part is really the tricky part because assessing yourself is really hard to do with no judgment. We're very judgmental of ourselves, and a lot of us are harsh critics, especially of our own performance. So just being able to sit through that, and that might take weeks, that might take months. For some people, maybe it's a shorter thing, maybe a couple of days, but I wouldn't rush it. I would really get to a point where you feel comfortable talking about how much money can you say to people how much debt you have out loud without feeling any type of way about it. It's just a fact. It's just like me
Right.
saying, the sun goes around the earth. Like if I'm like, or the earth goes around the sun, if I say this, I don't feel a type of way about that. I'm
Right.
just saying it because it's a fact. And I know, and like this is something that we know. This is a fact. I'm saying it. But for some reason, we put all of these emotions, all of this shame, all of this negativity around these facts that are honestly, they're just facts. We should just start to say them, be okay with them, get rid of the shame, the judgment, the negativity, and then we can push past it and say, okay, now that I know this, if I don't like it, what can I do to change it? What's in my locus of control to address it? But if we're still like tainted with negative emotions, shame, feelings of guilt,
Mhm.
and like then we're never going to be able to address the numbers of it until we address all that stuff. So I feel like for me, definitely step one is the assessment, and then unpacking it and doing the mental work, and then comes the math.
I love that. I like that you have framed that pretty beautifully too. So then with the math portion, all right, where do we start? Like, is it budgeting? Do we have to look at our like where do we even begin with all of the math stuff?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I would say it always starts with your net worth. A lot of people say, "Oh, I don't like looking at my net worth." Oh, it's especially if it's negative, and it's like, again, if you've done the mental work and the emotional work, then you know that this is just a fact. This is just a number that lets you know where you are financially in terms of the comparison between what you have that are assets to you versus what you owe that are liabilities to you. All you need to do is just compare those and see where you are. Are you close to zero? Are you below zero? Are you way above zero? Like, where are you? That's just a thermometer. You're just trying to figure out what's your temperature check. And then once you do that, you can start to see what are some things naturally that would come next to help me move in the direction that I want to go in. Right. So that for most people, that's going to be debt, tackling debt. And if you're not somebody who has a lot of debt or any debt, great. Then that you can jump kind of to like wealth building and like aggressively accumulating wealth, because that's going to help you move in the right direction on your financial net worth. But at the end of the day, it's just looking at these facts and asking, okay, what can I do to move in the right direction that I want to be going in? And so, again, I think for most people, that is going to be addressing debt, having a debt payoff plan. And it's very powerful to sit and do that, because then okay, on December 31st, 2023, I will make my last payment towards debt and I'll be debt free. Being able to say the day, being able to know, like, it feels amazing. It's like getting rid of this huge dark cloud above your head and having clarity to know when this is going to happen. Without a debt payoff plan with a really clear step-by-step number every month, how much you're going to pay to which accounts, it's very hard to have an idea. You might be like, maybe I'll be done paying it next year or the year after that. That's not clarity. So I think the debt payoff plan usually comes first, and then the wealth building plan. But for a lot of people, they'll do them both at the same time. And I think that's totally fine too. Again, you have to know yourself. Can you kind of, do the cold turkey thing and go all in, or do you need to focus on one step at a time?
You've had some experience with debt yourself too, right?
Oh, yes. I
So you
graduated
mentioned the credit
college with,
cards.
oh, yeah. I graduated college with almost $20,000 of credit card debt. It was just a little bit less than that because I did have one student loan that I took to go study abroad. But I was
Oh,
one of
okay.
those lucky kids that got a full ride to college. So I didn't have to take on a lot of student loan debt for tuition and like my dorm and meals. A lot of that stuff was covered by my scholarship. But what my scholarship didn't cover was, textbooks and school supplies and
Yep.
social, stuff, social spending. So I ended up using credit cards to make up the difference and to buy my laptop and to pay for
Mhm.
my science lab fees and to my art supplies and all that stuff. And it was thousands of dollars every semester. So by the time I graduated, and also, I'll tell you the truth, after the first semester or two, I realized how easy it was to just put stuff on the credit card and pay it
Oh,
little by
for
little.
sure, for sure.
So I was like, oh, let's go to Cancun for spring break. I can go. I can just, then it
I'll
became
work
like,
hard.
yeah, I deserve this. So I think, yeah, it started off as like totally fine. I needed a way to pay for a lot of those educational things. And then once I realized how quickly it was to just accumulate, take on the debt, I was like, oh, boom, I'll just put more stuff and pay it little by little. But I never understood how using credit cards impacted my credit score. Nobody had ever explained that to me. And it's
Yeah.
wild to me that at 18, you could get a credit card without having any understanding of what that's doing to your credit score.
It is
So,
wild.
yeah, it's so sad.
It'd
Because,
be cool if there
at
was like a
18,
precursor there.
oh, 100%. And it's same thing for other types of debt. When you're 18, you can take on a car loan, you can take, you can sign up for a mortgage, you can do all these things because the
Mhm.
18, you're legal age. But, if the regulation is going to say that we can do anything financially, sign on dotted line, take on debt at 18, then where's
Mhm.
the education? I think like regulation and education to me are two things that like they sit on a seesaw. And like
Yes.
when regulation goes down and there's not a lot of regulation, then we need a lot of education. But when education's really low and we're not really getting a lot in school, then regulation needs to be high to kind of make up for it because people don't really know. So we need to protect, protect people.
True.
And I really see them as like a seesaw. But right now, they're kind of both really low. Like there's not a
It's
lot of
true.
financial education. Regulations aren't really strict. So, that's why people end up with massive amounts of debt. That's why we're in a student loan debt crisis. That's why so many people, can't keep up with their mortgage payments. So it's scary. And that's why I think we have to start talking about this from like the individual responsibility that we
Mhm.
got to take to our financial situations, but also holding systems accountable for the lack of resources they're providing in terms of education and regulation for all of these different aspects of our financial lives, at least in this country. And I can only speak to America, obviously, being that I live here.
I like that you're mentioning both of those pieces too, because they are huge factors that we often overlook. And I think a lot of times we steer clear of like the regulation side because we feel like that's not really my place, it's not my
Right.
problem. Like
Right.
it feels like we're not always included in that. So I'm
Yep.
curious for you do a ton of work on the regulation side too, which I appreciate. How do we start to become more involved in that conversation as just individual consumers?
Yes. Okay. So I would say it's probably not going to be every issue, but decide which
Right.
issues you care the most about. And so for you, if that's the environment, if that's education, financial literacy, decide what the issues are that
Mhm.
you really want to see improve or change or that you want to be a part of. And then start to look locally within your
Mhm.
local government, who affects the decisions being made around those issues. So for example, I work with a lot of financial literacy legislation. And for me, that would be looking at the education committees on both sides of the chambers. So on the Senate side and the House side, there are
Mhm.
members, representatives, and senators who sit on committees. And one of those committees is the education committee. Since I care about financial literacy education, I'm going to want to pay attention to those education committee meetings. This is all public record, you all. You can literally just Google up, my state education committee members on the Senate side, my state education committee members on the House side. Look to see who are the reps, who are the senators' names that are on that committee. Tweet at them, reach out to them on Facebook, write them letters to their legislative aides and their offices. All this stuff is public information. You can find their address, reach out to them and just say, hey, I noticed that the agenda that's publicly available on the state website has nothing about financial literacy. When are we going to see you all talk about financial literacy and make some change so that our next generation of students are actually learning about this? I would like to see this. The reason why that matters, even though it might seem like it's just one small thing, these lawmakers care about their constituents and what their constituents care about. Like, right? Because their constituents voted them into their elected
It's true.
positions.
It's very true.
So if you're telling them that you live in this zip code, you're in their constituency, and you are going to hold them accountable for this particular issue, that matters to them. There's not a lot of people writing letters and tweeting at senators and reps. So if you do that, if you could rally people in the community to do it, they're gonna take notice. They're gonna pay attention to
True.
that issue. You're gonna get a letter back. You're gonna get a tweet back because they care about their constituency so much. They want you to continue to vote for them and support them and know that they're doing the best they can since you elected them. So I would say the easiest way is to find out what's the issue you care about, what committee meets to address that issue, what's on the agenda for their meetings for this, legislative session, and can they do something differently? Is there something you want to request that they do, or is there a particular bill already being proposed that you think that they should vote yes on? Make your voice heard. Write a letter, tweet at them, whatever you're going to do, phone calls, because your voice really matters.
It really does. I appreciate you sharing all of that too. And I know that the second half of your book is so focused on being that change for
Yes.
our life, for our communities, for everybody.
Yeah.
I think the second half of the book is so powerful. Is there a chapter specifically that you are extra proud of in that section?
Oh, let's see. I mean, I think for me, the one that I would say is probably the most has been the most impactful for me is wrapping my head around wealth building through the stock market. So I'll say the
Yeah.
last chapter or the second to last chapter is investing, set it and forget it. I don't know. I just growing up, the stock market was such a foreign concept to me. I never understood it. I don't think anybody ever talked about the stock market to me. And when I did learn about it, it was through like watching movies like Wolf of Wall Street and thinking
Yep.
that the stock market was like these people on the trading floor in Manhattan. And so for me, like, I think getting to the point where I can confidently say, like, I have a passive investment strategy. I focus on the long term. I'm throwing money into my investment accounts, but I'm living my life and focusing on being a good person. I'm not obsessing by, day trading, swing trading, trying to make a quick buck every day and then having to deal with those short-term capital gains tax headaches. Like, I've learned enough that now I feel like I have the best information to make the best choice for how I want to set up my life and the way I want my daily life to look like. And I want more people to have that confidence. So I think I would say I'm really proud of that investing chapter and putting all of the things that I've learned, that it's all data driven. I think that's the key with my investing chapter. It's all research backed. Like, I put all of the research in there, and I'm like, if you don't believe me, go take a look at this study. Like, the studies don't lie. Everybody, all the numbers kind of show what's true and what's typical and what's not. So, while everybody thinks that, buying the next hot stock is how you're going to get rich, that's just not what the data shows to be true.
No, no. And it does feel like, because we see those like one-off headlines sometimes, and we, for some reason, internalize that. We'll see some of the data and we're like, but this guy I know made it millions of dollars on crypto.
Yeah.
So therefore I should too. And I'm not anti-crypto for anybody listening in. Like, I think
Yeah.
it has a place and that's fine. But
Yeah.
I do think sometimes we do see those headlines and it just like for some reason sticks with us. And I don't
Of
quite understand
course.
why.
Yeah, and I mean it's sensationalized, like it's just
It
like
is
going on social media and scrolling through, and like you want to click on the stuff that's the most sensational. You're not going to click on like
always
the normal stuff, right? So
right. Right.
if they give you the normal plan for like average everyday people to become millionaires over a 20-30 year working career, that's boring. I don't want to
I
learn that yet.
know,
But
right?
I wrote in my chapter, investing is supposed to be boring. It's boring but powerful. And
It
if you
is.
could accept that it's just gonna be boring, but I'm gonna make a lot of money and it's very powerful, then you'll finally just get over the fact that it doesn't have to be this hot, trendy, action-packed thing. Like, you're
Yep.
not in a Hollywood movie. This is your real life. Like, just get over that.
It's so true. I love this conversation so much. Before we officially part ways, so first and foremost, tell everybody where they can get a copy of your book.
Okay, so everything about the book, including like chapter excerpts, like little
Mhm.
summaries about what the book, the chapters are about and everything like that, and as well as the link to buy the book, it's all on mindyourmoneybook.com. So the name of the book is Mind Your Money. Mindyourmoneybook.com has everything you need, and then if there's any other information that like you're looking for or that you want to ask, there's a contact form on there, so you can always just reach out to me directly.
Sweet. Okay. And then you're very active on Instagram too. So Miss Be
Yeah.
Helpful on Instagram. It's going to be linked in the show notes as well.
Yes.
So go check out her content. It's so good and so fun. And I think you're going to learn a ton.
Thank you. Thank you, Winnie. This is so sweet.
Of course. Now, before we officially part ways, are you down for some rapid fires?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Question number one. Where is one location you're dying to travel to?
Okay, Mauritius Island. When I was in college, I met this girl who studied abroad with me in Paris at our study abroad program. Her family was from Mauritius Island. I had never even heard of Mauritius Island,
Yeah.
but at that time, she was telling me about her life there and how her family was like this very wealthy family. They owned like a private jet company that only flew from like Paris to Mauritius Island to like London, right? And
What?
so I was like, where is Mauritius Island? She's like, it's off the coast of Africa, and most of the people there speak French. It's a francophone, island. And I was like, okay, like, let me see pictures of it. Girl, I will never forget the pictures of on her
Huh.
phone of like just normal everyday life in Mauritius Island. Beautiful. I mean, when I tell you, the clearest waters I've ever seen, the most bright, beautiful colors. Like,
Mhm.
I have never got that out of my head that I got to go to Mauritius Island before I die.
Well, scoot over. I'm going to now.
Yes, girl, let's plan our trip.
That sounds perfect. Okay, my next question for you. What's one purchase you recently made that has made your life better?
Ooh, I recently booked a 1 hour deep tissue full body massage.
Oh, that hurts.
It hurts so bad, but it hurts so good. So I've been like doing a lot of time in the gym lately, like because my boyfriend, he's been very committed to his fitness and
Good for
nutrition,
him.
and he hired this boxing coach and he started boxing like almost every day. He's down like 30 pounds and
Holy crap.
he looks more fit than he was when I met him 10 years ago. So
Wow.
I feel like the competition is on now. I'm like looking at him like, oh, now I gotta step up my game. I can't I can't let myself go and living in this apartment with him. So I started, going to fitness classes. I started doing Pilates, like 2 more workouts at home. And it's a lot. Like, your muscles are really sore. You're so tired every when you work out a lot. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and just do this massage. I need it. And as painful as it was, I got to tell you, the next day, I was like instant relief when I woke up in the morning. It felt like all of my muscles were like freed of like this cage they were trapped in from like the constant working out. So full body deep tissue 1 hour massage, I would pay $200 again to get that done.
So don't be a pansy, Whitney. Get it together.
Yes, yes.
I'll
And
try. I'll try.
it doesn't have to be deep tissue. Maybe for you it's a Swedish massage, but
Yes.
it's definitely relaxing, and it helps with the muscle soreness. And it's also just like meditative because you kind of go to another place while they're massaging. So it was
It's so
nice.
true. I love that
Yeah.
so much. Okay, so aside from your own book, what is one book you find yourself gifting or recommending most often?
Ooh, J.L. Collins, The Simple Path to Wealth. That was the book that put me onto a path to become confident investing, and with a passive approach, and not being obsessed with like trying to learn about the stocks and looking at the trading charts. Like, it doesn't have to be that. If you want to do that, great. But if you don't want to do that, don't feel that that's the only way to invest, because it's not. And J.L. Collins, the way he wrote his book was like from a fatherly perspective to his daughter, and he just wrote it with like just this calming sense. And when I read that, I was like, I want everybody that I know to read this book. So every time I'm talking to my family or people ask me about books or investment, I always say the best book for investing, J.L. Collins, The Simple Path to Wealth.
Amen to that. Okay, my final question for you. In your opinion, what is the secret to financial success?
Ooh, okay. The secret to financial success is being the one fish that is swimming against the current. And I talk about this in my book. I call it swimming against the current, which I think is really hard to do, because everybody's, going one way, doing this thing, and you have to kind of like like make such an active effort to, go the other way. It was when all the pressure and the force of the water and their physical little bodies are moving past you in the other way. It's easy to just kind of go with the flow. But when you're doing something financially that goes against the grain, that's kind of not the norm, like trying to pay off a big amount of debt, or trying to invest aggressively and retire early, or maybe just work part-time for the last 20 years of your career, any of these big moves that you're making to kind of free up more time and have more time freedom, they're not easy. And most people aren't doing that stuff because it's not easy. So it's going to take a lot of swimming against the current, swimming against the grain. And, all the other fish are going in the other direction. And you kind of have to force yourself to keep going where you want to go and ignore all that movement and momentum. And I think that takes a lot of security in your goals and who you are, and ignoring a lot of the judgment from people around you and a lot of the social pressures that say, this is what you're supposed to wear, this is what you're supposed to buy. And just being like, nope, I don't really care about any of that. I kind of got my own goals, and that takes a lot of mental resilience, and a lot of grit. So I think that to me is probably the number one thing for helping you navigate your finances.
I love that so much. Yanely, thank you so much for hanging out. It's always good to catch up with you, and congratulations on your book.
Thank
Thank
you
you
so
for
much.
writing that. It's fantastic, and I'm so excited for people to read it.
Thank you, Whitney. And again, if anybody wants to reach out, don't be a stranger. I'm an open book, if you can't tell from our conversation. So definitely connect on social media at Miss Be Hopeful, or anywhere else that you see me online.